following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello and welcome to Perspectives. My name is David Schoneman. I'm your host on this program. On Perspectives, we look at a variety of issues on national, state, or local level that are of concern to voters at home. We want you at home to be aware of what's going on in your government so that you can vote properly or well informed when the time comes. We are in March 2021. The 2020 election seems to be way back in the rearview mirror, but there's still a lot of work being done in the background to verify that our election results were truly accurate. We've had a few instances around the country, and one right here in New Hampshire we're going to be talking about today, where the paper ballot count looks, in some cases, radically different from the machine counts. And we want to look into this to make sure that our elections are safe and secure as we move forward. Today we're going to be talking about the Windham incident, which you may have heard about before, and I've got some interesting guests in the studio with me today. I'm here with Ken Eyring and Tom Murray, who are Windham residents, concerned citizens, who've been looking into some what could be called an irregularity, or at least an anomaly, in the vote tally process. And I want to welcome them and kind of get an update here. Welcome, guys. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks. How about if I give a brief history of what happened, and then
Please
we can
do.
go from there.
Great.
So on November 3rd, at the end of the day, our machines tallied up the votes, and in the state rep race, we had four candidates, or four positions for Windham. 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats ran for those seats. And the fourth place, all 4 Republicans won. Mm-hmm. The fourth place Republican beat out the first place Democrat by 24 votes. So naturally, a recount was requested. And that 24 votes, which represented 0.005% of a difference, grew to 420 votes after a recount, which is a 9.6% difference. And how that managed to take place was that all 4 Republicans gained, within 3 votes, they gained 300 votes, and the leading Democrat lost 99 votes. All the other Democrats gained votes. So there's several different areas of concern. You know, why did one candidate lose that many votes? Why did all 4 Republicans gain 300 votes? So these are questions that we want answers to, because we want to know that everybody's vote is counted properly. We want to have assurances that we have integrity in our election process. So we don't know what the process, where the errors came in. Was it machine error? Was it our, did our moderators make a mistake? Was there a mistake made up in Concord when they did the recount? We don't know. So, Tom and I, we've been looking into this. We have all the data. We have the paper tapes from the machines. We've looked at all the, there are anomalies that, might indicate where some problems took place. But the bottom line is we want to bring in outside people. And we've been pushing for this for months. We want to bring in outside people that are third party, separate from everyone who has been currently involved up to this point in time. So our moderators in the town, our selectmen who oversaw the election, keep them hands length distance. Same thing with the AG and the attorney, the Secretary of State. Keep them arm's length distance. Bring in a third party, and let them look at everything. Let them look at the ballots, look at the machines. Do a forensic analysis of the machines, look at the memory cards, and then, give us their thoughts. And then from there, we can figure out, if there's any other issues that need to be looked at further.
That sounds great. How many votes were cast in total in Windham that day?
There were 10,006 ballots. And the thing that's disturbing for me is that in just one race, if you count up all of the changing in votes, right, the 300 give or take votes for all 4 Republicans, the 99 votes, and then there's another maybe 50, 60 votes for the other 3 Democrats. When you add them all up, it's 1,363 votes were changed with the recount. That's a lot of votes for one race for just 10,006 ballots. How do we know that all the other votes were counted, all the other races were counted properly?
Because no one looked at the other races.
That's correct.
No.
As part of your audit, are the other races going to be examined as well?
There's going to be, according to the way that SB 43 has been written, they're going to look at all the machines, all 4 machines, take all 10,006 ballots, run them through each of the 4 machines, compare the results across them. They're also going to do hand recounts of 3 races. They'll do a hand recount of the state rep race again, and then 2 other races. I believe those are the Senate race, U.S. Senate race, and the governor's race. But those are minimums. So if the audit team comes in and decides that in order to ensure integrity across all the races, they'll have the ability to do that as well. The audit process will be defined by the audit team. It's literally an independent audit, which is the way it should be.
That's the way it should be. I can just give you, maybe the folks at home, just a slight comparison. When I won the Board of Alderman race in 2013, only 1,000 votes were cast. The margin was 5, and during the recount, a couple votes changed. So really, in New Hampshire's history, we don't see big swings at all. We might see 1 or 2 vote swings, depending on the size of the race or the size of the city, where the race was conducted, but we don't see hundreds of votes move. This is by far and away, the largest discrepancy, we can say, that we've ever seen in the state, right?
That's true.
Right, right, by vote total. Right. Now, I was speaking with the Secretary of State a couple weeks ago, and he said, percentage-wise, it's not the largest, but by vote total, it is. So 300 votes is the largest discrepancy. He gave the example of a vote in Windham, I believe it was 2006, 2008, where the discrepancy went from 400 and something votes up to 600 and something votes. So it was like a 44% discrepancy. So depending on how you look at it,
Sure.
you know,
But these are large numbers, especially in a
very
state
large
like New
numbers.
Hampshire,
Very, very disturbing numbers.
where in many cases races are won by 5 votes or 2 votes or even 1 vote.
That's correct.
And if or a race could be tied, and then it's ultimately won by 1 vote after a recount. So very, very small numbers. Just the way that New Hampshire works, these are just the way it is here.
That's right.
So when you see a movement of 300, it isn't like the city of Chicago where a movement of 300 might mean nothing.
That's
Here in New
exactly
Hampshire, a
right.
movement of 300 is astronomical.
Significant.
Very, very significant, and we can end up with different results. In this case, the results didn't change, but certainly the results can change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what we had. One of the interesting pieces for me when we looked at the data was the amount of overvotes that you saw. And for your audience, an overvote, if you're filling out the ovals and it says select 1 and you did 2, the real intent of the voter is not known, so that vote is thrown out. On machine 1, the tally tapes indicate that there were 18 overvotes. However, on machine 2, there were 292 overvotes, which is a significant amount of overvotes. So again, to add to why we think it's so important that we have third-party forensic analysts come in, because we want to look at not only the machines, we want to look at the ballots. This year was, unique in the sense that it was the largest amount of absentee ballots that were ever cast in an election. In the 10,006, we had over 3,200 of them were absentee.
Wow.
And why that's important is because these absentee ballots are handled differently. They're not pristine ballots that you would typically get when you sign in and straight. These get folded, they're putting into an envelope, into another envelope. They're handled, they have creases on them. So there's potentials for, the optical eye scanners, the AccuVote OS 2000 Model A scanners to, have difficulties in scanning some of these ballots. And that could add to why you have those 292 overvotes on machine 2. And again, ballots, optical eye, we don't know what happened. So that's probably, I think that's the biggest compelling issue. The fact that we don't know is why we want this investigation to come, so we can learn from it and figure out how to remedy the problem. Because at the end of the day, we have 2 competing results. We have a November 3rd election day result and a significantly different, recount result.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's important because if it's the machine, those machines count 85% of the votes in New Hampshire. So, we really need to, from a statewide issue, if it's the machines, it's not just Windham. If it's not the machines,
Right.
then it is just Windham, and that'll be a good thing, because then we can either look at the process and then make adjustments there, or if it happened in the recount when it was done up in Concord, they can make adjustments there. But we need to know, and the state wants to know.
Well, I'm glad the state wants to know. I think we absolutely need to know, because if it is a machine, like you say, these machines are used everywhere. And New Hampshire's reputation is at stake.
It is.
We pride ourselves on being the first in the nation, right? Our primaries, and that first in the nation status where the rest of the country can look and see, well, what does New Hampshire think? If we cannot guarantee beyond a shadow of a doubt that our election process is full of integrity, then our reputation as first in the nation becomes meaningless.
Yeah.
And we pride ourselves on that, rightly so. I want to see New Hampshire remain the first in the nation. I think it's very important. It gives candidates a chance to come and not spend a ton of money and still get a lot of exposure and have an election. But if we can't guarantee that, if there's some sense that something is going wrong, then it's meaningless.
There's a lot of national
Secretary of
exposure.
State Bill Gardner deserves a tremendous amount of credit.
Good.
I spoke with him about 3 weeks ago before the hearing for SB 43. And we were on the phone for about 3 hours. I
Wow.
shared my concerns with him, why I wanted to have a forensic analysis of the ballots as well as the machines. And initially, we were 180 degrees apart. And after about an hour, he made a suggestion, well, what if you want to test your machines, what if we give you some blank ballots and then you can fill them out and you can run them through? And I said, well, that was actually our plan B, but if we got ballots, I'd like to get 10,006 ballots. I'd like to try to replicate as close as possible. But even then, there's going to be anomalies, because I was part of the recount process, 9 days after the election. And I saw that there were ballots that had ovals filled in and then some of them X'd out, and some of the ovals were missed. And so although it would be a pseudo reestablishment of what recreation of what happened on November 3rd, it wouldn't be an exact duplication. And he got that. So we continued to talk, and after a while he asked me, so what is it that you want to do? And when I explained what I meant by a forensic analysis of the machines, where people would come in, third-party experts, who have expertise in the ability to look at the programming on the cards to make sure that everything is set up properly, that all the updates were done properly, that all the machines were programmed exactly the same as all the other machines, and that all the chips are seated properly so that there's nothing that could have happened along the way. And he said, I support that. And then he said, well, what is a forensic analysis of the ballots? And I said, well, we just want to make sure that all the votes on all the races and all the ballots were counted properly, because there's a concern that there were so many votes that were missed just for this one race. It's important for people to have confidence that our votes are being counted. And I don't think, personally, I don't have any preconceptions as to where the issue is. But I explained to him, I said, there are people out there that believe our machines were hacked and that they were fixed to produce fraudulent results. And those are the people that we need to prove. We need to provide evidence that that wasn't the case, so that people can have, confidence in our election processes. Right. And he reiterated those words. He said, absolutely, that's important. And when I heard him say that, I was so gratified, and I told him that there are anomalies across the country that took place on Election Day and in the weeks after Election Day, November 3rd and going forward, where there were very serious concerns that were raised, and they were swept under the rug. Even with people signing affidavits, sworn affidavits, and putting their livelihoods on the line and the risk of going to jail if they're proven to be lying, all of that information wasn't even looked at. It was just, tucked away nicely, and there's nothing to see here. And to Bill Gardner's credit, he wants to ensure everyone, no stone left unturned, that our machines work properly. And if they don't, we need to know that as well so we can address it. So I have nothing but very positive things to say about
I
him.
like him too. When I When I filed to run for Senate a few years ago, I was up in Concord to do that. My family all went up there, and I had a little chat with him, and it was great. I liked him. I know he had a very tough re-election process
Oh, yes.
a few years ago, and I fully supported him for that, and I'm glad he's there. I think that he's the one who safeguards our first in the nation status, and he's the one who proves to nation and the world that our elections are sound.
Longest
And I-
serving Secretary of State in
That's
the
right.
Union.
That's right. I got a quick question about the overvotes. I've heard a term kind of in my conversations out there with folks about it, adjudication,
Yep.
adjudicated ballots. If there's an overvote, 2 ovals or an X or the machine kicks that out. Does somebody else then go and take a look at that ballot and say, well, this one really needs to be counted for so-and-so?
Well, there's two different things. My understanding from the adjudication process is, well, overvotes and adjudication. Overvotes, my understanding is when they go through the ballot and it's an overvote, it's just put into the the bucket with all the other ballots. It's just not counted for that particular race.
The rest of the races are counted.
The rest of the races are counted, correct?
Okay.
And then it's registered down at the bottom of the tally tapes as an overvote. So one of the issues that had come up during our election, which is unique to Windham, was we had Republican poll watchers and we also had a poll challenger that were prohibited from meaningful observation to look at the processing of the absentee ballots. So that kind of became a contentious part of this whole issue that we're still unraveling here. And I know there's several affidavits that exist from those individuals. And in fact, the AG is aware of those. The assistant AG, Nicholas Chung-Yen, is aware of those as well. But to the overvotes, as far as the adjudication, if it's not able to go through the machine, that's where the ballot's actually placed off to the side. And that's when, by law, you're supposed to have representation from both parties that witness that adjudication process take place, and then it's actually hand tallied, and that's all present on the on the moderator's worksheet. You'll see all those numbers and anything that didn't go through that wasn't machine counted,
Like a write-in vote.
like a write-in vote. It's the exact same process.
Right.
How many adjudicated ballots were there in your race?
Oh,
And
gee,
when
off the
did-
top of my head, I don't know.
Roughly.
I don't want to speak because I don't want to get
That's
it wrong.
okay. I'm just curious. Wondering, is it 2 or 3 or 5, or is it like 100 and 150 or something like
Yeah, I don't know either.
Okay.
That's a
It
good
wasn't in
question.
the hundreds. I can
Okay.
tell you that. It was
Yeah, but one of the things that Tom brought up is the fact that certified poll challengers, they literally
Yeah.
had documentation from the state saying that they have a right to be there to oversee the election on behalf of their party. They were not allowed to have meaningful oversight. And that's the same type of things that happen across the country in other states. Corey Lewandowski, a Windham resident, former campaign manager for President Trump, was
Right.
in Philadelphia with a court order to allow him into the Philadelphia Convention Center to oversee the vote counting days after the election, which was still going on, and they refused to allow him in. So similar type thing happened in Windham during Election Day when there were Windham residents who were certified poll challengers wanted to watch the process, as Tom just explained, and they were told to stand 50 to 60 feet away. You can't meaningfully oversee the processing of the ballots when you're that far away.
Was it just Republicans or Democrats too?
Just Republicans, to my knowledge. Which brings up another issue too. I can't remember I think it's RSA 666. I'm gonna not get the number right, but anytime you have a significant difference between an election day result and a recount result, a monitor, is supposed to be assigned to the next election
From the AG's office.
from the AG's office, and I requested
Was it
that.
the AG's office?
Yeah, from
Yeah.
the AG's office, and I requested that from Assistant AG Nicholas Chung-Yen. He's in charge of the elections up at Concord, and that didn't happen at our recent election, and so I know there's some issues that have arisen that are just coming out of our recent elections with some recount potentially going
Recent,
on.
not back in November.
Not back in November, our recent March election, just a few weeks ago.
I see.
Yeah. So there's going to be some information hopefully coming.
The same
out soon.
machines were used.
Different machines. We actually, the machines that we had used in November, along with the memory cards, they're in our town vault under lock and key.
Okay.
We obtained newer machines from LHS Associates. I actually had testified at the March 1st Selectmen's hearing, requesting that they all be hand counted. You know, and I believe until we get answers to that we should be hand counting. So I know there's some have been recent issues that have been raised about the, I think it's the March 9th election that we just locally had, as to whether or not, you know, those machines have produced accurate results as well. So,
Well, that's always it's going to happen for every election going forward until this is resolved.
yeah.
That's right.
Because someone's going to say, well, it happened back then, it could happen now. And they're absolutely right. Unless we can find out what really happened, because there has to be an explanation, right? There's some explanation somewhere. If you're able to find it, then we can lay these things to rest.
Right. And even if the answer as to where the discrepancies took place, in my mind, we can at least find out whether the machines work properly or not. And that's important. That's a big piece of the puzzle. And we can also find out what the accurate vote totals are of the ballots. And if they match up to the hand recount on November 12th, then we know something happened on election day. We may never know exactly what happened because it might be human error. There's many different parts of the process where that could take place.
Yes.
But at least we're going to know that our machines work right and that the ballots were counted properly, at least, you know, in the hand recount. And if not at the hand recount, if they match election day, then we'll know that there's something wrong with the process with the hand recount that needs to be looked at.
Right.
So we may not actually get the answers because it might be impossible to do that. But at least we're going to get some very valuable information that can still restore validity to our election process.
And Ken, the part that you mentioned too, and I don't want it to go under, I want to, you know, emphasize, is the ballots themselves, because I think it's important that people understand when they're programming the memory card, they're putting it on the name. So let's say the three of us were on a ballot and we're running for a position. You know, it's going to go by last name, and the Secretary of State is going to pick a ball out of and let's say it's D, and then from D, and then it will go E, F, G all the way around. And that's the position of the ballot when it's printed. But if that ballot is not printed correctly, and let's say in order, I'm at the top of the ticket, you're at the bottom of the ticket when it's supposed to be the reverse, I could theoretically get Mr. Eyring's votes and he could get my votes. And so that's one of the issues where we also want to look at the ballots themselves and see how those are actually programmed with the software to appear on the ballot so the optical eye scan recognizes the correct name.
So there could be two different versions of a ballot out there. Is that possible?
I don't know if it's possible to have two different versions, perhaps in the memory card. I mean, and that's what we don't see. What we see is we can see a ballot, but what we don't see is what's behind the ballot.
I see.
That's the curtain we need to open up.
Yeah, and it's important to mention as well that even if the machines didn't function properly, it doesn't mean that anybody did anything intentional to do that.
Right.
You know, and I want to be clear about that.
Right.
I've never used the word fraud.
Right.
Tom's never used the word fraud.
I think that's outstanding.
We just want to know, you know, how the discrepancy, to the best of our ability, you know, where that came from so we can move on.
Question for you about what's going on in Windham. Is it just you two guys who are spearheading this thing, or do you have most of the citizens of Windham? Where's the town council sit on this whole thing? How are you doing
It's mainly Ken and I, but there's a lot of other people that have
You have
spearheaded.
support.
Well, Senator Guider, number one, Dr. David Strang, number two. Senator Guider, I could go on and we could do another show about the wonderful things that
I like that guy.
Oh,
Yeah. He's also a pilot.
yeah.
We talked about aviation ahead of the show.
That's the aviation group.
That's right. He's also a pilot.
And the selectmen have been very supportive as well.
Selectmen as well. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
And everyone's been working towards the same goal. Everyone, I think, wants meaningful answers, and I think that's the important piece of this: is meaningful answers. You know, people don't just want these aren't the droids you're looking for. We want are those the joints and what's going on. We're prying and we're poking and we're making sure that every rock is turned over, and
Good.
and we're not going to stop until that happens, because we
Great.
want to give the people, because look, at the end of the day, it's we the people,
Absolutely right.
you know.
What's the next step in this whole audit process?
Next step is for the bill to get passed through the House, then go to the Senate, and then it'll go to the governor. I don't foresee any issues there. Nobody that I've spoken to in Concord on the House side or the Senate side foresees any issues. Leadership on both the House and the Senate are behind this bill.
Great.
So it looks like that's going to, be a no-brainer. It's just a matter of going through the steps to do that, and then picking the right forensic team or teams to do the job. That's the next key phase. We got to get the right people in who are going to know what they're doing, because if they don't, they could literally, for instance, one team that I spoke with, you don't turn on the machines. You could alter their state. So before you do that, you have to break the seals. You have to bring out the memory cards. You have to image the machines. So you have to take a snapshot of the current state of the machines before you do anything with them. And you take that, you hand it off to a specialist who can then, analyze the states of each of the machines and compare them against each other. So right now it's getting the bill passed, then picking the forensic team, and then it'll be to perform the process. But we got to get the right people to do that.
When do you think the governor is likely to sign it? May, June?
From everything that I've heard, it's 2 to 3 weeks into April.
Okay.
And then they have once it's signed, there's 45 days that process has to actually be completed by. And then there'll be 45 days after that for the forensic analysts to actually deliver a report.
That sounds like a tight time frame.
I've spoken to a couple analysts, and they say that that's doable. It's nothing that they're concerned about.
All right. Good to hear. Hey, we're nearly out of time here. I want to thank you both for coming in. Time goes very fast in the show, and this is very good stuff. I'm very interested in what happens here, and I think the folks at home will be too. So maybe we'll get a development in a few weeks and maybe have you back on and bring us up to date. Thanks very much for coming in. Really appreciate it. I want to thank you folks at home too for tuning in. My name is David Schoneman. You're watching Perspectives, and we have Ken Eyring and Tom Murray from Windham, who are sharing their efforts to get to the bottom of what is now known as the Windham incident and find out what really happened on Election Day and make sure that our elections are safe and secure. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.